In 2016, scientists discovered a Greenland shark that was nearly 400 years old, meaning it had been swimming in the ocean since the Trinh Nguyen War in Vietnam. Not only did this shark live an incredibly long life, it also grew to over 7 meters in length. And what surprised researchers even more, it wasn't the only case. Many creatures on the ocean floor, from giant squids to manatees to bare-faced fish, share one thing in common: they are unusually large compared to their shallow water relatives. But why is that? In this video, you'll discover the mysteries behind the phenomenon of deep-sea giants. From temperature, pressure, oxygen, to even unheard-of evolutionary laws. And by the end of the video, you'll understand why a seemingly harsh environment is the birthplace of the most magnificent creatures on the planet. If you also love strange discoveries and interesting science, don't forget to follow the channel so you don't miss the next fascinating stories. The deep sea is one of the most mysterious places on Earth. Although the ocean covers more than 70% of the planet's surface, much of the deep sea, especially the area below 1,000 meters where light cannot reach, remains almost completely unexplored. The temperature here is always cold below 4 degrees Celsius. The pressure can be hundreds of times higher than at the surface, and there is no light at all. However, in this harsh environment, which seems impossible for life to exist, there is a rich and extremely strange ecosystem. In this area, deep-sea creatures are not only different in morphology, but also possess sizes beyond imagination. Typically, the sea worm Riftia pachyptila can be more than 2 meters long, while its relatives in shallow water are only a few centimeters long. Greenland sharks can reach more than 7 meters long and live for hundreds of years. Giant squid genus Archaeopteryx can grow to over 10 meters in length, with the Antarctic giant squid Mesonychoteuthis hamiltoni estimated to weigh over 500 kilograms. Species such as Bathynomus giganteus, also known as the giant sea sponge, can grow to over 30 centimeters in length, while similar crustaceans in shallow waters are only around 2 to 3 centimeters long. Not only is their size overwhelming, but their appearance often evokes the feeling of creatures from science fiction. Many species possess strange survival features such as transparent bodies, bioluminescence, long sharp teeth, or even no eyes. For example, the faceless cusk eel, discovered at depths of over 4,000 meters, has an almost smooth face because its eyes have completely degenerated and its mouth is covered by thick skin. What's more remarkable is that the species diversity at great depths is not as reduced as previously thought. Modern expeditions using manned submersibles and deep diving robots have recorded hundreds of new species in a single survey, including fish crustaceans, soft corals, jellyfish, and many that have yet to be named. The existence of these giant, unusual creatures that are perfectly adapted to extreme conditions makes the deep sea world both fascinating and difficult to explain. It is not only home to some of the most mysterious creatures on the planet, but also a valuable repository of data on evolution, biological adaptation, and the ability to survive in extreme conditions. That explains why scientists are still working tirelessly to explore this region, even though reaching the depths of the ocean is more difficult than flying into space. One of the most surprising phenomena in the deep sea is deep-sea gigantism, or the phenomenon of increased size in the deep sea. This is a term used to describe the fact that many creatures living at great depths on the ocean floor have body sizes that are significantly larger than similar species living in shallow water or on land. This characteristic is not only common, but also occurs in many different groups of organisms, from mollusks to crustaceans and fish. A typical example is the giant sea beetle Bathynomus giganteus, a crustacean in the family Isopoda. While its close relatives on land, such as small beetles and ground beetles, are only a few centimeters long, Bathynomus can grow to over 30 centimeters. A similar phenomenon occurs in the giant squid Archaeopteryx, which can reach lengths of more than 10 meters, many times longer than normal squids. Even the Antarctic giant squid Mesonychoteuthis hamiltoni is recorded as the heaviest squid ever discovered with an estimated weight of over 500 kilograms. In the fish group, the Greenland shark Somniosus microcephalus lives in the deep sea around the Arctic and North Atlantic, often reaching 6 to 7 meters in length, surpassing many shallow water sharks. In particular, this fish is also famous for its average lifespan of up to hundreds of years. In addition, there is the marine worm Riftia pachyptila, living near hydrothermal vents at depths of more than 2,000 meters, which can reach 2 meters in length, while normal marine worms are only a few centimeters long. A notable common feature of large deep-sea creatures is that they often live in cold, dark, high-pressure environments with extremely low food. In these harsh conditions, having a large body size brings many survival benefits. Larger sizes help the body retain heat better, increase the ability to move farther to find food, and especially can store more energy through the accumulation of fatty tissue or special body structures. These benefits make the phenomenon of increasing size a reasonable evolutionary trend in some groups of deep-sea creatures. However, not all deep-sea creatures are giant. The phenomenon of gigantism only occurs in certain species, usually species with long lifespans, slow growth rates, and living in areas with high dissolved oxygen or stable low temperatures. Studies since the beginning of the 21st century have shown that this rule cannot be applied to all invertebrates, especially microorganisms or species only a few millimeters long. But what really causes them to become giant science currently does not have a single explanation, but many hypotheses have been proposed, each with its own perspective reflecting the diversity of evolutionary, physiological, and environmental factors. 1. Low temperature hypothesis. Bergmann's rule applied in the sea. One of the prominent hypotheses proposed by paleontologist William Foster Parker at Stanford University is that low temperatures in the deep sea are an important factor in promoting the development of body size in many species. This hypothesis is based on a principle known as Bergmann's rule, which is commonly applied to warm-blooded animals. Individuals living in cold climates tend to be larger than the same species living in warmer places because larger bodies help reduce the rate of heat loss through the skin. According to Mr. Parker, this rule can be completely applied to deep-sea creatures. In an environment with a temperature of almost constant 2 to 4 degrees, a large body will have a smaller surface area volume ratio, which helps reduce energy loss. This is extremely useful in places where sunlight is absent, food is scarce, and energy sources are almost impossible to generate voluntarily. Although deep-sea creatures are not warm-blooded, the principles of surface area and heat retention still have widespread physical applications. However, the limitation of this hypothesis is that it cannot clearly explain why some species do not change size, even though they live in similar cold conditions. In addition, from a depth of about 1,000 meters, the seawater temperature no longer fluctuates much, so the temperature factor may be only part of the overall mechanism causing gigantism. 2. The high dissolved oxygen hypothesis. The second hypothesis, proposed by Duke University ecologist Craig McLean, suggests that the amount of dissolved oxygen in the water is a core factor affecting the size of organisms. At depth, the low temperature and high pressure allow the seawater to hold more oxygen. McLean argues that environments with high levels of oxygen allow organisms to grow more cells, leading to larger overall sizes. In his 2001 study of marine snails living at depths of 2,000 to 4,000 meters, he found that dissolved oxygen levels increased by about 20% and snails grew 3 to 4 times larger on average. This suggests that the link between oxygen and size growth is real, at least in certain groups of species. However, there are limits to this link. Not all deep seas have the same oxygen levels, and some oxygen-rich areas do not see significant increases in organism size. In addition, Species living at extreme depths, from 8,000 to 11,000 meters, are sometimes not as large as expected because although oxygen is abundant, the pressure increases to the point where biological structures are limited. 3. The energy storage hypothesis. A more physiological hypothesis is put forward by former marine biologist Kevin Zelnion. That is, large bodies help deep-sea creatures store more energy through the accumulation of fatty tissue. In waters where food is scarce and unpredictable, the ability to store and use energy economically is a vital factor. In a recent report published in May 2025, a research team from the Chinese Academy of Sciences, led by Professor Ji Hanai, decoded the genome sequence of the crustacean Bathynomus jamesi, one of the giant creatures of the deep sea. The results showed that the species has special genes and enzymes that break down fat extremely slowly, allowing them to survive for months, even years, without consuming additional food. This is rare experimental evidence that the large body, one-year energy reserve hypothesis has a clear biological basis. 4. Low predation pressure hypothesis. Another approach comes from Dr. Lloyd Peck of the British Antarctic Survey, who argues that the scarcity of predators in the deep sea has allowed organisms to grow larger without risk of extinction. In the surface layer, organisms face intense evolutionary pressure to escape camouflage and reproduce quickly. But at depths of several thousand meters where light is absent and predators are greatly reduced, species can live longer, grow more slowly, and thus accumulate body mass over time. This is especially true for species such as Greenland sharks or deep-sea rockfish, which are known for their long lifespans, slow maturation rates, and low behavioral variability. Rather than having to shorten their lifespans to reproduce early, they can survive longer and thus grow to larger sizes than species that are constantly preyed upon in shallow waters. 5. The hypothesis of mobility and food access advantages. One of the most important survival factors in the deep sea is finding food sources, something that is extremely scarce. A large body with long and powerful arms, tentacles, or moving parts allows an organism to reach farther, detect prey more effectively, and digest large amounts in a short time. In addition, large size helps to cover or hold on to carcasses that fall from the surface to the seafloor, a major source of nutrition for many species. For example, giant crustaceans such as Bathynomus are often found feeding on whale carcasses, large fish that have fallen to the bottom. In an environment where the opportunity to eat can come months apart, the ability to preserve most of a carcass is a vital survival advantage. A large body is not just an offensive tool, it is a weapon for protecting food. One of the most striking and decisive features of deep-sea creatures' ability to survive is their extremely low metabolic rate. In the harsh environment of the ocean floor, where there is no light, temperatures are always near freezing and food sources are extremely scarce. Sustaining life requires a more optimal energy strategy than anywhere else on the planet, and it is the slow metabolic rate that becomes the key to survival that helps creatures here survive for centuries. Metabolism is the biochemical process that takes place in the body of an organism to convert food into energy to maintain life functions. Normally, in animals living on land or in shallow water, the metabolic rate is proportional to body size and activity level. However, in the deep sea, where food is not always available and sometimes months apart, creatures cannot spend energy as usual. Instead, they have evolved to use as little energy as possible, maintain a slow, sedentary lifestyle, and live to extremes. A landmark study by biologist Rui Rosa of the Portuguese Center for Marine and Environmental Sciences, published in 2010, provided clear data on the link between low metabolism and survival in deep-sea creatures. In it, the team measured the metabolic rate of the Antarctic giant squid, Mesonychoteuthis hamiltoni, a 500-kilogram species that lives at depths of several thousand meters. The results showed that this individual only needed 30 grams of food per day to sustain its life, an extremely low figure compared to any animal of similar mass living in surface waters. Not only that, When compared to a whale of similar size, the amount of energy that giant squid consumes daily is up to 300 times lower. This suggests that deep-sea creatures have evolved a special physiological mechanism to maximize energy savings, not only helping them survive in conditions of food scarcity, but also minimizing risks by requiring less movement, less hunting, and avoiding unnecessary collisions. Explaining this low metabolism mechanism, scientists point out that two environmental factors play an important role: low temperature and high pressure. In conditions of temperature near 0 degrees Celsius, biochemical reactions in cells naturally slow down, leading to a significant reduction in the rate of energy consumption. At the same time, high pressure also reduces muscle activity and other movement functions, helping organisms maintain a state of energy conservation for a long time. Another classic example is the crustacean Bathynomus giganteus, a giant sea beetle that can live up to 5 years without eating if it has enough fat reserves in its body. They have been recorded to survive on just one large meal of carcasses that have fallen to the bottom and then enter a state of extremely low metabolism for long periods of time. This is clear evidence that a slow metabolism is not only an advantage, but also a requirement for organisms to survive in an extremely slow-paced environment like the deep sea. Nature's solution lies not only in spending less energy, but also in using energy wisely. Some deep-sea creatures, instead of actively hunting, wait for prey to approach in the dark. For example, anglerfish fish with glowing baits on their heads attract prey with bioluminescence. This allows them to move less and still find food, saving maximum energy. These survival strategies are common in the deep sea, where energy is the most precious asset. Long lifespans are also a direct consequence of low metabolic rates. One notable species is the Greenland shark Somniosus microcephalus, which lives in the cold depths around the Arctic. A 2016 study in the journal Science found that the oldest individual identified by radiocarbon dating of its eye was 392 years old. With a growth rate of just a few centimeters per year and the lowest metabolic rate of any shark, the Greenland shark is a clear example of the slow pace of life associated with sustainable living in the deep sea. When the metabolic rate is reduced, not only is energy saved, but the aging process also slows down. This gives the organism more time to repair cell damage, avoid the accumulation of mutations, and optimize its life cycle. It also explains why many deep-sea species not only live long, but can reproduce at very old ages, helping to maintain sustainable populations in harsh ecological conditions. From an ecological perspective, low metabolic rates also help to stabilize food webs in the deep sea. Because organisms consume less, the pressure on the food chain is also reduced, allowing some species to survive longer despite low densities. If all species were active at the same pace as surface animals, the food supply on the ocean floor, which consists mainly of sunken organic matter, would never be sufficient to sustain the ecosystem. Another interesting aspect is that the body structure of deep-sea organisms is also designed to accommodate low metabolic rates. They often have soft bodies without the need for hard bones or strong muscles. Instead, the parts that move or hunt are minimized. Many species, such as the faceless cusk eel, have almost no eyes, saving energy for visual processing or navigation. Structural simplicity, as opposed to physiological complexity, is nature's way of balancing survival against energy costs. With climate change and rising ocean temperatures, many scientists are concerned that deep-sea ecosystems, which are tightly controlled by low metabolic rates, could be affected. Even small changes in temperature or oxygen can upset the balance that has developed over millions of years. Therefore, studying the metabolism of deep-sea creatures is not only of academic value, but also helps humanity better understand how to protect the most fragile ecological regions on the planet. One of the things that has astounded scientists when studying deep-sea creatures is the incredible longevity of many species. While most creatures that live in the ocean's surface or on land have relatively short lifespans, ranging from a few years to a few decades, some deep-sea creatures can live for centuries, even nearly half a millennium. This phenomenon is not only a sign of a slow pace of life, but also a clear manifestation of an evolutionary strategy to adapt to harsh environments where life must be prolonged to ensure the ability to survive and continue the species under extremely limited conditions of energy and reproductive opportunities. One of the most notable cases is the Greenland shark Somniosus microcephalus, a shark that lives in the deep cold waters around the Arctic and North Atlantic. In 2016, a study published in the journal Science made a shocking discovery. A Greenland shark may have lived to be 392 years old, making it the longest-lived vertebrate ever known. Scientists used carbon-14 dating to determine its age using the radioactive isotope carbon-14 that accumulates in the fish's eyelens, a part that remains unchanged throughout its life. Other specimens have also lived to be over 300 years old, suggesting that this is not an isolated phenomenon. What's unique about Greenland sharks is that they grow extremely slowly, only about 1 centimeters per year. Individuals that reach 5 to 6 meters in length are usually over 150 years old, and the species' age of sexual maturity is estimated to be around 150 years or older. That means they can live for nearly 2 centuries before they start reproducing. This is an evolutionary strategy that goes against the grain of many surface species where early sexual maturity and rapid reproduction are conditions for survival due to high mortality. It's not just the Greenland shark. Many fish species that live at great depths also live significantly longer than their shallower relatives. Research by Professor Callum Roberts at the University of Exeter has analyzed data from a variety of deep-sea rockfish Sebastes spp and found a clear trend: the deeper the species lives, the longer its lifespan. Some individuals have been found to be between 150 and nearly 200 years old and only reach reproductive age after living for more than 40-50 years. This suggests that in the deep sea time is not measured by seasonal cycles or sunlight, but by metabolic rate and evolutionary patience. The direct cause of the long lifespan of deep-sea creatures is believed to come from the extremely slow pace of life, which has been demonstrated in many studies of low metabolic rates. When biological functions operate more slowly, the rate of cell damage is also significantly reduced, naturally extending the life cycle. In addition, the lack of predator threats, especially at the ocean floor, allows organisms to focus their resources on cell maintenance and maintaining life functions rather than devoting all their energy to escape or early reproduction. Another factor contributing to the long lifespan is the strategy of few but sustainable reproduction. Many deep-sea creatures reproduce only once in their lifetime or have a very low reproduction frequency because environmental conditions do not allow them to ensure the survival of large numbers of young. Therefore, to increase the chances of survival, the life cycle needs to be extended, allowing enough time to find a suitable mate, produce eggs or sperm at the right time, and wait for favorable environmental conditions to reproduce. Another interesting example is the deep-sea snail Neptunea antiqua, which has been recorded to live for up to 140 years despite being only about 10-15 centimeters long. It grows slowly, lives in cold water, and has a reproductive cycle that lasts for years. Instead of growing fast and dying early, species like Neptunea survive by sticking to a slow evolutionary cycle, making the most of each small reproductive opportunity over a long lifespan of centuries. Scientists also note that having a long life in the deep sea does not mean that all species are long-lived. Many invertebrates, microorganisms, and small animals still live short lives and reproduce quickly because they occupy a different position in the food chain. But for apex predators, organisms that are able to live independently and have to move around a lot to find food, long lifespans become a special competitive advantage, ensuring biological sustainability in an unstable ecosystem. In addition, there are recent studies that hypothesize efficient DNA repair mechanisms in deep-sea organisms, helping to prevent aging and cell mutations. Several genes involved in repairing genetic damage and fighting cell degeneration have been found in the genomes of Greenland sharks and some deep-sea mollusks. However, this is an area of ongoing research with no final conclusions. Interestingly, long lifespans are not only a sign of survival, but also make deep-sea creatures living evolutionary archives. These long-lived species accumulate stable genetic traits that are less susceptible to short-term environmental changes. This is of great value in the study of climate change, slow evolution, and even medicine, as genes and proteins that extend lifespans may have potential applications in anti-aging in humans. However, the researchers also warn that their long lifespans and slow reproductive cycles make these creatures extremely vulnerable to human activities such as overfishing, chemical pollution, and deep-sea mining. Once their numbers decline, the ability of long-lived species to recover is very low. Therefore, protecting deep-sea life is not only a matter of biodiversity conservation, but also a way to preserve precious symbols of the long-term evolution of life on Earth. After all that science has discovered, it can be said that the phenomenon of deep-sea creatures becoming giant is the result of a unique set of ecological conditions that cannot be replicated anywhere else on Earth. The combination of low temperatures, high pressure, abundant dissolved oxygen, a lack of predators, and scarce food sources has created an environment that forces organisms to evolve in a very unique way. It is in this environment that large size becomes a survival advantage. It helps to store energy, minimize heat loss, increase the ability to find prey, and especially maintain longevity thanks to a slow metabolism. It is worth noting that there is no single reason to explain gigantism. Instead, each species is a living testament to different evolutionary strategies. Some species become giant to survive for years without eating. Others live for centuries just waiting for the right time to reproduce. And there are also species that have simply adapted to an environment that humans still do not fully understand. The deep sea is not only home to strange creatures, but also a powerful reminder that life always knows how to survive, even in the dark, even under terrible pressure, even when no one sees. If you want to continue exploring the mysteries hidden deep in the ocean, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories, where science always opens up unlimited horizons.